And let's get over to a screen share. And I'll take you over to Brightspace. And I want to also point out a couple of things if we just kind of take a look at our table of contents in Brightspace. What we have here is a few updated links. So as you know, we can kind of just, this was just some introductory material here for the welcome week. Then we start with week 1, and I've got the new, the lectures all kind of in proper order. Here's our August 25th lecture. Here's our August 27th lecture. And here is our Grammar Essentials link. I can just move that up actually, just so it's very nice and easy to find, because that's the same Grammar Essentials that I keep adding to. I've even added a couple today, the PowerPoint presentation that we will look for, and so that you can review all of the necessary parts of speech and the verb stuff. Recorded Zoom lectures, 1st and the 3rd. And here is here are your handouts from last week that we talked about. So moving on to today, as soon as we get this up, I'll replace this link, this class Zoom link for our meeting today, and I'll just replace it with the recorded one, so then you can just go to the next link there when it's time to do that. But let's take a couple of looks at, that's not actually a sentence. Let's look at a couple of items on Grammar Essentials.
Can I ask a question? This is
Please,
about the grammar test. First of all, when would that be?
It's going to be a test similar to what what we've been doing already. I'm going to give you some stuff. I'm going to let you take it home and you can think about it and you can do it. But I'll probably do it in a better format, like a Google Forms, so you can have a multiple choice and an answer.
And will it be?
Yeah.
So will that be more about like correcting sentence structure and things like that, or will
I'll give you, it's not the theory. You don't have to know any of the theory in order to get that. I'm not going to ask you what's the part of speech here. What I'm going to ask you is what all of this stuff goes toward, which means, can you use the punctuation correctly? Can you conjugate the verbs in the sentence correctly? It will all be practical. It will not be provide a definition for X, Y, or Z.
Awesome.
So the definitions are only there to help you write more clearly and effectively.
Okay.
So yeah, it will all be a hands-on. It's just that this is the vocabulary that we need to discuss why a sentence is
of course
going sideways, essentially. So when we get a sideways sentence and it's kind of going all over the place, to bring you back on track, we got to talk about the nuts and bolts. So I can remind you what a noun is if you just forgot real temporarily, but if you never knew in the first place, or you haven't heard about it since 7th grade or something like that, it's going to take forever. So that's why we're kind of yelling around all this kind of stuff. But you will be able to, I will ask you to kind of identify the problem points in your own writing in the future, because those are the points that you're going to really want to study and memorize so that you can fix recurring problems with your writing. So hopefully it won't be too messy. And what I wanted to do was get around to it within a week or two, maybe 2 weeks on the outside, but we're going a little bit slower this semester because just life happened. So we're going a little slower this semester. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you. That sums it up pretty well.
Yeah, no worries. And so, yeah, I'll give you plenty of notice for the actual test when it comes up. But I want to get a little bit more practical, and we're coming we're very close today, and maybe one more day of my actually lecturing about this stuff, and it's all going to be practical from there on out. We're going to do a lot of run-throughs, and then we'll have a test when you and I are both feeling comfortable that we have this kind of material together. So
thanks.
Oh, my pleasure. So I wanted to take a quick look at the strange case of because. Now, the strange case of because, it's not a coordinating conjunction, even though it kind of looks and feels like one. Our coordinating conjunctions are the fanboys or the fanyabos, the and, but, and or group. And then we have our subordinating conjunctions, which demote the level of a sentence from an independent clause to a dependent clause. And those you'll recognize as the although at the beginning of a sentence. So these ones, like because, they are similar to conjunctions in a certain way, but we kind of punctuate them differently. And so what we're going to do is take a look at what because is and all of the words that are related to because. So let's kind of go on to the other conjunction is subordinating. Guess what? The other conjunction is called a conjunctive adverb. That's what because is. Because is a conjunctive adverb. And I want to point out right here that I'm using the semicolon ironically because I told you not to use it. So here's how you actually use it. You use it a lot of times when you're putting two independent clauses together and you're starting the second independent clause with a conjunctive adverb such as however. So there'll be more down here, don't worry. This will hopefully make sense after I just finish, but maybe I'll just continue for a second and then we'll take some questions, okay? So the conjunctive adverbs modify clauses and phrases rather than individual words. So they're not conjunctions in particular, but when they modify a whole clause or a phrase, just a group of words, then they start looking a lot like them, like a conjunction. So sometimes they function similarly. So notice here, what I'm saying is they sometimes function like conjunctions. This whole thing right here is an independent clause. We got a they and we got a function. That means I got a subject and a verb. Now let's look at what we have after here. We have a they and have rules. So we have a subject and a verb. So when we have a subject and a verb complete thought, subject and a verb complete thought, that's an independent clause and an independent clause. And we can link them there on both sides of the semicolon, because if a semicolon is going to link parts of a sentence together, we need independent clauses on both sides. That means a new subject after it. So since it's not a new sentence in particular, exactly a new sentence, we can leave that capitalization off. But other than that, they kind of act like a new sentence. And what we're going to do is, instead of putting a comma and an and then running on with the rest of our new sentence, what we're going to do is separate our conjunctive adverb with a comma after it. So we have an independent clause on this side, a semicolon, then a conjunctive adverb, and then a comma. So here's the thing. Remember when I said that this is really just a matter, the semicolon is really just a matter of emphasis. It's kind of grammatically like a period, only it's less strong. So it's stronger than a comma, but not as strong as a separation, a marker of separation than a period. But since it's not a complete new sentence, the one thing you got to remember is you don't capitalize the next word. If this were a period, we could just end this sentence right here, and then we would just have to capitalize however. But after the however, we are going to include a comma. So that means that this is kind of a transitional phrase or word. And after an introductory or transitional word or phrase, we're going to start including commas. And we're going to come to that, back to that in many, many forms and discuss how we can kind of do that effectively. So let's take a look at some of these other words. And when you see them in a list, I think they're going to kind of fall into place for you. So here's the quick rules. And this is really all you need to know. If you do want to research this a little bit more, it's here. But this should do it. The conjunctive adverb are these guys. And you'll notice that a lot of these are transition words, really. And meanwhile, back on the ranch, meanwhile, comma, back on the ranch. Accordingly, comma, I'm going to continue over here. I made a point, either period, new sentence, capital H, however, comma, or I made a point, semicolon, lowercase however, comma, and I'm going to continue with a new sentence. This however is signifying that what I said before is going to be in opposition to what comes after. Furthermore, here's your excellent, excellent transition word for more of the same is coming after this. Finally is you're signaling to your reader, we're getting to the end of it now. Maybe this is the last in a series of pieces of evidence that I'm presenting. So you don't go finally right at the beginning, right? Also, more of the same. Besides, a little bit of an aside. Consequently, you're showing a causal connection. So with all of these, including then, These are going to be your transitional words, and you can make transitional phrases would be something that serves the same purpose, but just includes a couple of words like on the other hand, or as stated before, comma, and now we're going to continue. So
if we didn't want to use a semicolon, we would have to use a period, or could we use a comma? Is that just too weird? You put a comma, nope. then your conjunction, then your comma.
Luckily, I can give you an exact answer for that one. No, you don't do it. So commas do not serve the function as a semicolon or a period. What they do, it means what that's going to be is if you have an independent clause, comma, and another independent clause, which you've made as a comma splice, that's an error. What you need is one of the other things. You can have a comma and a conjunction like and, but if you're missing one of those two, then you have one of the various mistakes. So we're talking about the difference between run-on sentences and comma splices right now. This is something that comes up all the time, but you'll see it when we look at specific cases, like down here. You can't say, let's say, period, however, period, right? Like in this one, that's not going to work. Commas and periods simply have different functions. Now, the one that's in the middle, the semicolon, it resembles the period more than it resembles the comma. The real difference there is that after a semicolon, you don't capitalize the next word the way that you would in a sentence, right? Like right here is a good example. The cat ate a bowl full of tuna. Then, to the squirrel's delight, the fat feline fell asleep in the rocking chair. So you notice that a period would also work there, right? The cat ate a bowl full of tuna, period. Capital T, then, on and on and on. But if you use a comma here, you're going to get a comma splice. The cat ate a bowl full of tuna, comma, then, comma, to the squirrel's delight. Can't do that. The fat feline, you have an independent clause. That's an independent clause right there. That's an independent clause right there. So you have to use not one of these conjunctive adverbs. You would have to use a comma and an and. Comma coordinated conjunction is how you put together two independent clauses. You don't. Yeah.
So when you, for your second sentence, if you are putting a period, that second sentence is a independent sentence. It's not dependent on anything, even though you're saying like however or then or something along those lines.
Correct. That's exactly right. So independent clauses are clauses that have a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. So thoughts can go on, right? You can have a very, very complex thought that has 27 parts, but each one of those 27 parts can stand on its own if it needed to. Like check this one out. What were we just talking about? This, read this out loud. The fat feline. Whoops, I'll look that up. Just read that out for me.
Sorry, you want me to do it over the?
Yeah, go ahead, Eli. It's Eli, right?
The highlighted, the highlighted part.
Mm-hmm.
The fat feline fell asleep in the rocking chair.
Let's check that one part of it.
Sorry.
What's the subject?
Feline.
Feline. The fat feline. Feline. Right. What did the feline do? What's the verb?
Fell asleep.
Good. And does it say that does falling asleep complete a thought? Is that an action? Not like the fat feline was. So you see that's incomplete because it was what? Right? It doesn't, you didn't complete a thought. But if the fat feline fell asleep in the rocking chair, is that a complete thought?
Yes. Good. Absolutely.
So that's all you're going for. It's not that you have the specific meaning and all the meanings of everything that the author ever intended. What you have there is enough so that if you took this out, it would simply make sense in English. That's what a really complete thought is. It doesn't mean that's everything we have to say about it. It just means that it's a complete thought in the way that the cat is not a complete thought. That's the distinction there. So independent clauses, you can string them together with commas and conjunctions, comma and, comma but, comma and, comma but, and you can put together 20 of them. And if you're William Faulkner, you might do that. You just go on and go on and go on with commas and conjunctions, and you're putting together independent clauses to make one sentence that's really, 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 really long. So after a certain while, you're going to want to give your reader a break, put a period, and begin anew. So we're going to get more practice with the hands-on, but I think that's enough of the theory right now, because you're going to see the difference between when we get to our practical. So I want to kind of move on, if that's okay. And if we have any questions, we can return to it later. Would that be good? Good. This is the difference between let's get to, we'll get to that next. This is all we need right there. There is more explanation down here. Come on. There it is. More explanation down here that we're not going to go over here, but I would definitely take a look at that if that was still a little bit on the fuzzy side. This tells you all the different stuff that you can do here. And here are a bunch of examples of what we're just talking about right now with the semicolon. But like I said, I don't think you really need to use the semicolon. If you really, really wanted to do something like this, you can put a period here, right there. There we go. Put a period there and begin the next sentence with a capital N for nevertheless, and you can use the comma right afterwards. And now you have the independent clauses completely separate. So what they're emphasizing here is that these two independent thoughts are extremely closely related, and I don't want to separate them with a period. They're so clearly related. Very, very subtle difference, and they're both correct. It's just a matter of emphasis that the author is giving you. That's it. That's why you can always basically use one of these as a new sentence if you want to. We have to get you new shoes. In addition, I have some errands to run. I wanted to emphasize the errands connected to this very closely. So I didn't start a new sentence. I just continued it with a semicolon. But they could have. Here's a sentence, right? I have some errands to run. That's a complete sentence. This is a complete sentence. You could have just said, we have to get you new shoes, period. I have some errands to run, period. Those are sentences, complete thoughts. So this is a way that you can put them together with a little bit more fluid transition. And moving right along. What I'd like to do is show you this. Grammar Mechanics worksheet. Here's our number 3. Come on, there we go. Now that it's there, I kind of like it. Okay, so here are all of the rules that we need for commas and for quotation marks. So on your worksheet right here, you have all of the rules. Now, all of this stuff is going to look extremely, extremely familiar. Does this list of coordinating conjunctions look familiar? We've gone over it, right? It just means that now we're going to put these things together. In order to separate independent clauses, you need 2 things: a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So if you leave one of these guys out, either the comma or the coordinating conjunction between 2 independent clauses, you've either made a comma splice, which is an error, or you've made a run-on sentence, which is also an error. You can't, you need them both. Now that's different if you want to use putting a dependent clause with an independent clause. Then you don't need both of these. Then you just kind of like, we'll get to some examples of that a little bit later. But that's what we're talking about with the dreaded comma splice and the dreaded run-on sentence. If you leave the comma out and you just say so and then start another independent clause, what you've done is you've just ran from one sentence to the next, one independent clause to another independent clause without properly joining them. That means that the sentence ran on. It's a run-on sentence. Introductory words and phrases. While I was eating, because your alarm clock was broken. If you are ill, when the snow stops falling. So these would be either these would be either subordinating conjunctions, like although, or they would be conjunctive adverbs, like because. After you get done with your introductory clause, so because her alarm was broken, you realize we haven't gotten a complete thought yet there. The because changed the her alarm clock was broken. This is a sentence, complete independent clause. When you add the because, it's no longer a complete thought. So now we have a dependent clause connected to the independent clause. And that's why we can use the comma there without the coordinating conjunction like but. Here, if it's independent, we need the comma and the coordinating conjunction. Let's go with, I wanted to go all the way down to essential and non-essential. So this is one that will become a little bit more evident. If we're talking about students in general, and we take the who cheat out, does the essential meaning of the sentence change? Students only harm themselves. Really? All students harm themselves? That's a pretty bold statement. Oh, no. Students who cheat. Well, it's only the students that we cheat who we're talking about that have this result, right? We're not talking about babies wearing, all babies are my niece, right? This is pretty important. The yellow jumpsuit one. So that's essential information because it lets us know exactly what we're talking about. And this is not essential. We could take it out and we would still have the same general meaning of the sentence. My niece is playing in the living room. If we did it this way and put the baby is my niece, we don't know which baby we're talking about. But my niece is playing in the living room. Yeah, we're still talking about the same person, right? So the Green Party candidate lost the election. Still makes sense. Here, if you leave that part out, not going to work. So that's the thing. Commas go on either one of these if it is non-essential, as in you could easily take it out, and you would still have the same meaning. If it's got to be in there, you don't want to separate it. If it's absolutely got to be there, and that's that. You guys know all about this. We talked about the separating legislative, executive, and judicial branches. It's the same as the American flag is red, comma, white, comma, and blue. You can just do it that way. Yep, this should all make sense. Okay, we've gone over all this stuff, so I'm going to stop the screen share, ask everybody to come together. Thumbs up with me. Okay. Good stuff. I like it. Thumbs up. Good. Okay. Okay, so as you come across the homework assignment for Thursday, as you go across with each in particular question, if things are becoming a problem that require more explanation, then we'll know about them by then. You can feel free to ask, and we'll go over anything. But I think if I think those particular examples and that particular amount of theory is plenty for now. So if you're ready, we can continue on to how we're organizing stuff. I'm going to introduce a couple of concepts to you today that we're going to return to. So we were looking at the current issue today that you chose. And everybody kind of had their own. Let's continue along with that. So let's get a couple of new volunteers. And if everybody could just write in the chat on the right-hand side what your topic was, even if you went the other day, but just refresh my memory. But we'll get a couple of new volunteers. We'll take a look at how we can organize our thoughts and how we're going to take a look at today's new kind of organizational information as well. So please, while you're doing that, right there in the chat window, let's get, let me show you something on the screen share. it is. If you need to quote, here's everything you need to use about quotations. It's all in the quoting and paraphrasing thing. So the difference between a quote and a paraphrase is if you have an open quote, everything that's in the middle there is exactly what the person said. A paraphrase is you explaining somebody else's idea in your own words. So no quotation marks necessary for the paraphrase. With the quote, it is going to give you a little bit of evidence, and it should be impressive. And if you changed it around, it would be less impressive. That's why you quote somebody. But you don't want to go overkill. Here is the punctuation that really makes sense for it. You set off a signal phrase like according to, or so-and-so said, or so-and-so wrote, comma, one space, and then open quotes. So this is, a quotation mark is a double quote. They're always a double quote and an ending end. You'll usually, unless you have some reason like this one, the page number, to put the period outside, you'll just put the period right there inside that quote. Don't use single quotes just yet. These are double quotes. If you want to say, for years, Marvin Macy heard someone say, and then you're quoting somebody who's quoting somebody, that's where the single hash quote mark comes in. And that's got to be ended before you end the bigger quote. That's the whole thing. So this, if I see, according to Franklin, and then a single slash here, that's just an error. Just fix it. Double quotes are always the double slashes. And here's a couple of introductory phrases. Easy. Brody states, according to Brody, that's all you need. States, says, writes, argues. Beyond that, if you get to exclaims and things like that, you're getting just beyond what you're helping your reader understand anyway, so you don't need to do any of that. The first time that you refer to a text, I like this one, use the author's first and last name in the signal phrase. And after that, you can simply refer to the author by the last name. So this kind of runs into a lot of problems that we'll see a lot of quotes that kind of says so-and-so says or whatever, and we don't have any context for what's going on. So you can always say Joyce Brody, a reporter from the New York Times, or a prominent New York Times reporter states, and then you go on to use the quote. Or physicists say, or they conclude, right? So if you're going to quote the Kyoto Protocols, you're going to say the Kyoto Protocol summary states. But when you start a quote, you don't want to leave people hanging and then figure out who said it after the quote's done. Let us know in a signal phrase beforehand what the significance of this person is, who this person is, and should I know this name? So if you need to say Einstein, we know that Einstein's Einstein. You don't have to say Einstein the physicist. He's just Einstein. That's all there is. But Joyce Brody, I don't know who Joyce Brody is. So we're going to have to say, I mean, let's pretend that Joyce Brody is a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist. Well, then put that. According to Pulitzer Prize winning novelist Joyce Brody, fatigue is one of the most common complaints brought to doctors. And that's it. So there's a lot of other things, and we could go on for hours and hours and hours talking about this kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about this citations just yet, but this is a general form that generally gets it, is if you don't have the author's name in the sentence, you've mentioned it like maybe 2 or 3 sentences before. The only reason you wouldn't have it in there is because you mentioned it 2 sentences before, and we still know who you're talking about. You haven't changed. Then that's when you go Brody and then page number. And we'll find out the page number from your works cited page a little bit later, but that's what will make sense. But if you already have the author's name, then you just put the page number. Now, you aren't going to really need that more than once for this class. The most important thing is that you learn to paraphrase really well, because you're probably going to be talking about your own thoughts, and you're going to be restructuring other people's thoughts in your own words, which is paraphrasing. So you can still say, according to Dr. Brody, fatigue is a very common complaint that doctors receive, period. No quotes, no need for them. I gave credit where credit was due. I told you who said it. It was somebody else's idea. Told you it was somebody else's idea. But I restructured it so that it was my words and I don't need to use quotations. And that's that. When you're talking about somebody else's ideas, just say it's so-and-so's ideas and then explain it the best you can. And typically that's going to be enough. So if all of these things, setting off quotations, you won't need to use any of this stuff. This is all kind of beyond the scope of what we're going to be doing for this. But this is kind of a nice thing. I like this page 5, the quote sandwich. You have basically a signal phrase at the introduction. You have the quote itself. And then this is really important. You always, always, always need to explain, analyze the significance of the quote and why you chose to use it. Essentially, you need to tell us what the quote means. The quote doesn't speak for itself. You have to tell us why it's important and what it means. So a good way to do that is to kind of say, and so Einstein in E equals mc squared, yeah, I'm just going to say Einstein said E equals mc squared, explains or illustrates that there is a relationship between matter and energy, right? You can't just say, well, E equals mc squared, so we're done. We need to know that you are putting it in perspective. That's the work that you're doing. It's your job in the essay to tell us what it means and how it means, and to tell us what it means without saying, just repeating it exactly. Just saying, well, as Einstein quote says, E equals mc squared, and so Einstein says E equals mc squared. That's not explaining it. That's not putting it in perspective. So don't just do that in order to do it, but you need to think about the quote as a sandwich. Let us know why you're doing it, who's doing it, what's fitting in here. So that's where your signal phrase comes in. Quote itself, and then explain its significance, explain it to us. And I think that's enough for, got a little more stuff here, a lot of this stuff. Here's kind of what, this is not necessary that you go through all of these steps, but I really, really do want to think of each paragraph kind of as this. I'm going to give you a little bit more on this subject a little bit later, but I want you to kind of think about express an idea, think of your evidence or examples. Evidence and examples are going to be interchangeable. You can either provide an example to illustrate your point, or you can quote evidence like a study, or like everybody could probably quote some kind of evidence about climate change right now. That's enough that you have on the top. So you're not going to have to do a lot of research on this, but you want to be able to illustrate the idea that you're talking about with something specific. And that's going to be in each and every paragraph. A paragraph has an idea that you're trying to get across, illustrate it with an idea, and then you can wrap it up, transition into your next idea for your next paragraph. That's really all I kind of want to say about this. You can take a look a little bit more about that after class. But let's go back here. Okay, back to regular old things. Okay, so did everybody get a chance to type in, let's see, video chat. Yeah, just go over to the right-hand corner of the chat window and type in the idea that you, or the topic that you were thinking about as far as your choice for your controversial issue. Yep, natural resources, good, keep going. Navigation, South Seas, yep, got it. Thanks for reminding me, JC. It was a good job last time, by the way. Climate change, ocean pollution. Ooh, shark finning, I haven't thought of that one. You want to talk about that? I don't know anything about it. Let's do it. You want to talk?
Yeah, I can.
Let's
So I love sharks. For those of you who don't know, sharks are one of my favorite animals, and I've written a lot of papers on them. But 4Ocean, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of 4Ocean, but they post on Instagram all the time, and they made one yesterday where it was like 73 million shark fins wash up on the shores of every ocean every year. So shark finning basically is you catch a shark and you fin it because it's sold black market. It's for black fin soup, but which causes a shark to drown because it's obviously their flotation device, kind of. So like other fish eat them, other sharks eat them, and they just are drowning in their own, where they live. So it's sad.
Shark fin soup is not a traditional thing. Like I've heard of turtle soup, but it's not made from turtles anymore. It was 100 years ago.
In China, it's not a American thing. But it's very popular in China.
Okay. So they're basically throwing the shark back in the water.
Yeah.
After they take the part, so it's the shark carcass, with the exception of the fin.
It just sinks because the shark fin, it keeps them floating.
Okay. So if you were to so this is a very interesting point, because this is one of those things, like I had this conversation one time with a Norwegian dude about whaling. And like Americans are pretty much on the same page as far as this is, but try telling that to a Norwegian who does it as part of their culture. There's like 2 cultures in the world that are still whaling, and Norway is one of them. And so it's just kind of like, wow, when you actually confront somebody that we all agree that you can't be hunting whales anymore. This is not, that's over, except for the people that do. So this is the thing. Who is your audience for this particular argument? That's what you want to think about. Is this the people, are you going to try and convince people that come from a different culture where this is acceptable? Or are you going to try and preach to the converted? Or are you going to try maybe a third option, preach to the people who believe you, that already agree with you, and get them to do something about it? Because I agree with you, but I haven't done anything about it. And I'll bet just about everybody's going to be in that same boat that you encounter, except for the people that are directly related with this issue. So what do you think is going to make a good essay out of those 3 possibilities?
I think convincing people to do something about it, because there's an actual, on the ballot this year, Trump is trying to take away the ban on shark finning, which means that anybody could do it. So there's like, oh, say no to this law, say no to this law. So, I mean, that's not really like a known thing. Like I didn't know about it until someone posted on Instagram. So he's trying to convince people that actually vote no against it, or.
Okay. So we're actually thinking about going back, even though that's not a thing in our culture, we're actually thinking about just, well, maybe somebody can make some money off of it. So, okay. So yeah, so this is a very, very, very solid approach. Is we have a ballot measure. We all agree that this is pretty much a bad idea, but there's got to be somebody with an interest in it, and we should stop that from happening. So let's all vote this way about it, right? Okay, so what's going to be something you're going to mention, but it's not your best argument. Something that's definitely important, but not the heavy-hitting reason.
I guess the populations of the shark, because I think 2015 I did a project on it. There was like a drastic change in the populations because a lot of like millions of sharks each year were being killed, and like no one really cared about it because they're like, oh, sharks repopulate, but it's like, well, they can if they died in the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
I guess kind of just like letting people know that like they actually don't just keep swimming. They don't grow it back. It's not like a lizard tail or something. They don't.
Right.
Doesn't come back.
So if I were to say, well, sharks eat people, less sharks, better for us. Sharks eat fish, better for us, more ocean fishing. If I don't like sharks, and I've never watched Shark Week, I've never gone into any of this sort of thing, and I've never even seen Sharknado. And I'm like, why is this a thing? Why not just sharks? What's the ecological consequence of a fall in the shark population?
They help a lot with the coral reefs. They keep the coral reefs in check. I found that out the other day, like watching Shark Week, actually. So, they keep
nice
reefs in check, so there's not like invasive species that come out and kill it and bleach it and do all that stuff.
Okay. So coral reefs, which connect to a larger issue of sustainability of the entire ecosystem of the world's oceans. Very, very important for all life in the ocean, you're talking about a potential ecosystem collapse, and that would be worldwide. That would be a catastrophe, and that we would not be able to come back from that. So that's the thing. Well, you may not like sharks, and you may even know somebody who was bitten by a shark, and you hate sharks personally. It doesn't. We're talking about an ecosystem, right? So that's perfect as far as it's a good reason, but it's probably not the only. Like, what would you say is your strongest reason? Your absolute hit it out of the ballpark reason.
I think there's multiple mini ones that kind of make it into one.
Okay.
The fact that, the black market, they're not even that expensive. It's like $50,000 for a shark fin that, like, it's not expensive, but it kind of is expensive at the same time.
Okay.
But I don't know, just kind of the money aspect, it's just illegal in general, because it's illegal in like 30 countries. Like they know doing it, period, but there's other ones that find a way around it. And there's like, oh, there's a loophole here.
Okay.
So you slither into that. They're just kind of making it known. Because people like, they don't care about sharks. So they're like, oh, sharks are bad. Sharks eat people, but not all sharks eat people. Kind of like not all snakes bite people kind of thing. So just trying to make them out to be good guys sometimes. I know that some of them are aggressive and can kill at times.
Yeah. Well, let me suggest this then. For everybody that's listening, where do you want to go with the structure of your essay? Do you want to start with your strongest reason, or do you want to start with a good reason and end with your strongest reason? What do you think is going to be more effective?
I think starting with the big reason, just to kind of like draw people in, like, oh, this is like a really big impact, and then they're like throughout there's like, oh, this actually happens because of this, and it's kind of like all interconnected. In the end, it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. I never even realized that.
Can I bring up the fact that we just like in our conversation right there that we just had, we started with what if you don't like sharks, and we ended with entire marine ecosystem. So what you did there, kind of inadvertently, or like subconsciously is probably a better word. What you did subconsciously was you brought in a reason that you think is a strong reason, and what that leads to is the biggest and baddest point that there is. So when you walk off the mat, you want the other person on the ground. It's going to take a while, but the knockout punch has to come at the end. And that's just going to be strategy. But you're going to lead into it. Now, everything is going to go toward that. But the way that you get somebody interested in this is you talk about, well, what are the reasons people are doing it? It's for one particular cultural dish that could easily be substituted with something else. There's no good reason to do it. And we're going to end with, we're killing our coral reefs, ecosystem collapse. So if you lead up into it into that way, you can end with the thing that was like, well, how do you come back from ecosystem collapse? There's nothing after that. Do you want to talk about food? Cuisine? No. It's going to definitely be the other way around. So when you structure that way, you kind of had an intuitive sense for it. And then I think once you thought about it, you thought, well, maybe it'll work best the other way. But you can kind of see like the way that you did it illustrated the point that I think is most effective, which is you're going to start by entering the conversation, and you're going to give some solid reasons, and you're going to end with your strongest reason. And that goes back to the classical Greeks, that goes back to the rhetoricians of the academy in Athens. That's what they recommend. That's what Aristotle says you should do. And then there was one more point, which is, where would be a good place to address, but other people say this.
I think what you were saying, kind of not maybe in the middle. Kind of voice your, not opinion. It depends on what type of essay. So like your opinion in like, or like kind of like a rebuttal. Like, but some people think that sharks are violent and they deserve to die, and
yeah.
Yada. So I think in the middle or somewhere towards the end, and then like kind of like sum it up and like, well, everybody has their own opinions about any topic in general, but yeah.
No, I think those are both those are extremely valid points, because you can address things as they come up throughout your essay, and so it can be interspersed like structurally through each body paragraph. That's one way to do it. Solid reason, nothing wrong with that. Another way to do it would be to just structure your essay so that you're anticipating the question. And what you do is introduction, body paragraphs, you give your best reason, and then others will disagree because this is also about culture going extinct. However, we've established that the collapse of the entire marine ecosystem is going to take precedence. It's a matter of simple survival, not just cuisine. So you've set it up so that you don't have to spend a lot of time, but right before your conclusion, right before you're going to end your final paragraph, you're prepared to volley that one back. And so, yeah, you can either intersperse it throughout, like you said, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there, right, as you encounter each point, or you can just save it all as the one at the end. So that's if you're going to address them at all. Now, in a simple essay, the simplest straightforward essay, you may not address it at all. You may just go, introduction, here's a couple of good reasons, I need to wrap it up because this is a timed writing and we only have 60 minutes, we got to get out of here. So in a timed writing, you may not have time to do that. But if you had to do it, probably the simplest way would be to work it into your final body paragraph right before you go into your conclusion. Great. Excellent. So with that structure there, do you feel that you could write a thesis statement that would kind of cover the bases in one sentence?
I think I could,
Mm-hmm.
if I word it in a unique way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I could.
Okay. Yeah, because it's interesting. There are not strong reasons to do this, but it's something that happens all the time anyway. And you could draw parallels with the ivory trade or rhinoceroses going extinct and things like that. Like there are not good reasons that these things are happening, yet they happen anyway. There's a market for them, people willing to buy them, even though the degradation to the environment is very, very strong. So that getting people on side is basically like there's a lot of ways to get sidetracked from this one, but remember, like, that's the point. I think is the argument is you want people to act, and that's what the thesis must have in it, is that it's coming to a point so that if we are going to build a more equitable environment for our natural habitat, a more sustainable habitat, we're going to have to act on this issue. And that's going to be your main point. That's going to be the crux of your essay, because otherwise we're going to be having a conversation about how people feel about cuisine and whether it's worth it. And that's not what you really want to talk about. Great job. Do you have anything you want to wrap it up with, or is that good?
I think that's it.
Cool. So when we're looking at our resources for organization, thesis statements, we're going to go back a couple of weeks. Think about your particular issue here with the idea of how can I make a thesis statement out of it? How can I make a level 3 thesis statement, a thesis that really brings in the wider picture? How am I going to introduce this topic? Because this one has the potential for really getting a kind of gut reaction from somebody. So you could open it up with that statistic that you know. How many sharks wash up as just decayed carcasses from being...
So the fins that they don't use is close to 73 million. But sharks killed each year, I think it's close to 3-4 million.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Great statistic. That's one way you could go. There's plenty of ways that you could go. Yeah, I mean, you could open up with, we brought turtles to the brink of extinction. Those large Galapagos turtles. I mean, that used to be a staple of really, really high society cuisine. They would catch these things in the giant tortoises in the Galapagos, brought them to the brink of extinction. Same things could be happening now, only it's not just the extinction. It could be larger collapse of our coral reefs. So there, yeah, apex predator, all that good stuff. So you could scare people, you could throw artistic in there with some gross stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of great ways you could go with that one. Good job. Let's talk about, Chinese pollution, Chinese sign of world hunger. Let's talk about hunger. How about world hunger? Is Sam there? Is Sam available to do some stuff? Where are you, Sam? Justin. How about, or possibly, nope, Kyle, you went last, yeah. Maybe Justin? How you feeling about doing a little talk through on social media?
I could talk about it for a little bit.
Well, what do you got? What are you thinking as far as social media is concerned?
I'm writing how if you're like a prolonged heavy user of social media, like you use it a lot, there's some like mental problems you could come across.
Okay.
Like increased productivity, decreased focus, decreased productivity, like decreased self-esteem, just like that kind of stuff.
Great. So you're going to probably bring in some evidence, right? Some other expert opinions.
Yeah, for sure.
So is that the kind of thing that you have kind of at the top of your head, like ready to go?
I know that I could probably find some like articles on how they made social media. They engineered it to be addicting. Like I know when you're like scrolling through it, it's like an infinite scroll feed. So like you kind of lose time in it. And then like part of like the reason it's so addicting is because like every 10th picture, it's like a really good picture. So like you're always trying to get to like that next picture, and they like engineered that from Las Vegas, like how to make people addicted to gambling. So it's like it takes certain cues from that.
Right.
And then it's just like subtracts from deep work. I don't know if you've ever read that book by Cal Newport.
Yeah, it's a good one. What's his name? Cal Newport? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to talk about like deep work and like how that social media is kind of affecting that. And that's what I have so far.
Great. I mean, you have a complete like idea there. So let me ask you then, what should we do about it? Is there a point of is this an education of like, you guys need to know this, or are you recommending a certain course of action?
I would recommend like turning on your screen time. So like, I know on iPhones you can see like, oh, I spent like 5 hours today on Instagram, and just being like aware of that. And if you like really want to like take it to the next step, maybe like deleting the app off your phone or just deleting your account.
Okay.
It's not like a social change. It's just like more personal changes.
Okay. Yeah. So for a personal productivity standpoint, because that was very much the crux of that book. And there were like lots of like specific suggestions. It wasn't just an analysis of what it's doing to you, so don't do it. It was, how do you deal with it in your everyday environment? Do not leave your email open at work. You have to check it even if you check it 3 times a day and get back to everybody at those 3 times, you don't want to be constantly interrupted. I mean, that was one that was kind of big for me, was I just have gotten out of the habit of emailing a lot. So I have to kind of remind myself to check for my students' emails, because I'm used to doing things in chunks. And then I don't check this or that or the other thing while I'm working on a different project. And although that helps with the project, I really just actually have to remind myself I've got the opposite problem that everybody else has. They're constantly doing emails. I'm never doing them. I have to remind myself to check my emails all the time. Yeah. So, but that's the thing is, as a result, using having Facebook open while you're studying for your engineering final is not gonna work. Yeah, it's just not,
like derails you.
Yeah, and I think
like having like Snapchat notifications come up.
Yeah, the people are definitely becoming more in tune with this is something that we have to deal with the same way that we have to deal with junk food. You just can't wing it and just be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to eat as many Doritos as I want for lunch, and that's lunch. That's not. You got to put a little more thought into your nutrition than that, or bad things are going to happen. So okay, you can organize from beginning to end, and it's really a matter of tracking and accountability to yourself for the goals that you set. You have to define the role of that thing in your life. Like you said, if you turn your timers on and you track it, You can measure. That's the important takeaway from the business world.
Yeah.
You have to measure it. Okay.
So it's like measure it, turn off notifications, like turn your phone on grayscale. Because like a lot of the times they have like flashing colors and like it means to draw you in. You turn on grayscale, like you won't see like those crazy colors, you know, like rewires your primitive brain and you're like, ooh, red, orange, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yep. That's why, since I don't use it very often now, I see red and orange, I just run after them in the natural world. It's very distracting. I know. I think we got a good couple of examples from today. What you would basically do is organize your essay around that, and that's the thing is, if the point is to educate people, then you're going to say that in your thesis. This is what I want you to take away. If the point is to get people to act accordingly, which is same way you plan for your nutrition. You don't just eat whatever you feel like all the time. That's why, you know, I have eaten ice cream for breakfast. I'll admit it, but you need a plan if it's come to that, right? So it's the same way that you plan your nutrition a little bit, you put some thought into it. We're going to have to start doing that with this aspect of our lives. We're going to have to start tracking it. We're going to have to start setting goals, and we're going to have to start setting limits.
Yeah.
This, right? Big picture, and then it can follow from there. Okay. I think that's good. We got some homework that's going to take a little bit of time with that grammar worksheet number 3 for Thursday. And I'm going to stick around right now for a couple of minutes to talk to anybody that has any follow-up issues. But I'll go ahead and stop recording,